Akpa.
Here.
Amutari.
Here.
Barrow. Bradbury.
Here.
Collins. Crenshaw.
Here.
Freeman. Gilmore. Gaucher. Green. Hale. Hammonds.
Here.
Harville.
Here.
Jean Francois. Jones. Lawrence.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Leeds.
Here.
Min. Moultrie.
Here.
Niles.
Here.
Patterson.
Here.
Robinson.
Here.
Rocker.
Here.
Simpkins. Sims.
Yes, sir.
3 Smiths.
Yeah.
Uno de los Smiths. Or as they say in French, un des trois. Turner.
Here.
All right. Let's see, a couple of quick announcements and we'll get firing on all cylinders today. We're going to lecture all week. Today, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, okay? And we'll have one of our 3-day weekends. It's a big weekend because we have an exam next week. But before we get to the exam, on Wednesday, this Wednesday, you have not only a lecture, you have quiz number 3, okay? You have quiz number 3, and you have the deadline to turn your essay questions in advance of the second exam. Remember, next week then we have a lecture on Monday and an exam on Tuesday, June 11th. I'm getting ahead of myself. June 11th, okay? All right, any questions about our schedule, anything like that? Everything is good, we're solid to go. Mr. Rocker.
When's the last day for the essay question?
That'll be this Wednesday.
This Wednesday?
Yep, this Wednesday, June the 5th. All right. One last announcement. Over the weekend, TCC has begun to move the student email system to its new email system. It was supposed to be done by this morning. It is not done yet. It is still migrating. So you probably don't have any access to your email at this point. Don't freak out. It's not you. It's not your computer. It's the system is still loading it in. And we just got an email about it on the faculty side to tell you that it will probably be this evening before it's all done. And so I wouldn't freak out unless you can't get into it tomorrow. You know, if you can't get it tomorrow, then I'll either have some information for you or you can call the help desk. But right now I can tell you it's not going to be done for several hours more, maybe even through the evening or into the evening. So it's just taking a lot longer than they anticipated. It's a lot of accounts to move over. So, and then they have to, once they move them all over, then they have to test the system to make sure it's working properly. So this does take time. Okay? It's the difference of moving over, say, 500 faculty as opposed to 16,000 students. Okay? So it's a lot of files moving. Okay? But when you do get in, you're going to get in the same way. Your email address is going to be the same. You'll notice a difference in the email, but you won't have any difference in terms of the access. Okay? Once you get in. All right. Very good. Questions, problems? Everything's good. All right. Everybody's happy with the weekend baseball results, I presume, and except for the Miami fans, Gator fans, and Clemson fans. Okay, just want to make sure everybody's Georgia Tech fans are probably not happy. Just make sure everybody's happy. Okay. All right. You know, Red Sox fans are happy they beat the Yankees this weekend. So. All right, these are all things I read. So. All right. I don't know about soccer. You're probably a big soccer guy over here.
Spain is Friday.
Spain what?
Spain is Friday.
Okay, there we go.
Saturday.
All right, very good. So, we are now talking about what topic? Tea time, right. We're talking about tea. All right. So, the British East India Company has 17 million pounds of tea sitting in warehouses that they got to do something with. And of course, what they really want to do is what? Sell it. Okay? They would like not to lose this money. Right? This is a lot of what? This is a lot of tea, and it is a lot of money, you say. So the Tea Act announces, the Tea Act of 1773 announces, the only tea that can be brought to the colonies for sale, and the only tea that will be for sale in the colonies will be this tea from the former British East India Company, from England, you see. Colonists are really riled up about this because they think now that there's a new constitutional argument in front of them, a new one. You know, the old constitutional argument was taxation what? That's right, but now we got a new constitutional argument, and that is freedom of choice. Okay. So many of you, if you think about some of these issues, and you hear about these issues today, a lot of the issues that we have today, constitutional arguments today, are based on the constitutional arguments that took place back in this period. You understand? I mean, the foundations for these constitutional arguments are really built back here. They think this is a freedom of choice issue. That we should have the right to buy tea what? From anywhere we want. Anywhere we want. But that just wasn't the law at the time. So, there were various reactions to this, depending on where you were. So depending on where you lived in the colonies, depended upon how your community reacted to the Tea Act of 1773. All right, so let's start with the city of Charleston, South Carolina, a port city, a southern city, okay, a port southern city. All right, and it's Charleston, South Carolina. And here's what happens. The governor of South Carolina, living in Charleston, of course, was worried about this tea. Okay? So he said, I don't care. Huh?
Who was worried?
The governor of South Carolina, he says, I don't care what you colonists think, right? I'm worried about this, but at the same time, this is what? This is the law. So unload the tea and put it in a warehouse, but don't sell it until I can find out more about this law. So take it off the ships, put it in warehouses in the port of Charleston, but we're not touching the tea. We're not going to put the tea up for sale. Okay? Until I can straighten this out. So that's how Charleston and South Carolina dealt with the tea. Okay? It was unloaded, but it was kept in the warehouses. All right? It was unloaded, but it was kept in the warehouses. It was not put for sale. All right, that's our first reaction. Now, so that's a southern example. I'm going to give you examples from each three regions. So now let's move to the mid-Atlantic reaction. And that's going to be the harbor of New York, the city of New York and the governor of New York. In New York, the governor was very concerned about the reaction, a negative reaction about the Tea Act. So he said, I'm not even unloading what? I'm not even unloading the tea. He refused to even unload the tea. In fact, he refused to even allow the ships that had the tea to dock at the harbor, on the docks. He made those ships stay out in the harbor. Okay? He was so worried about it, he wouldn't even let them park their boats at the dock. He said, keep those boats in the harbor until I can figure out what?
What to do with it.
What to do with this. Okay? So two very different reactions, but similar concerns. Okay? One, take it off, but we're not selling it. We're just going to keep it in the warehouses. Two, we're not even taking it what? We're not even taking it off the boat. Okay? We're not even taking it off the boat. So you have the southern reaction, you have the Atlantic reaction, the mid-Atlantic reaction. The third city is in the northeast, and that, of course, is the city of Boston. Up in Boston, The governor was also concerned about the future of this tea and of course, the city. So he said, well, you know what? The ships can come to the docks, but keep the tea on the ships. Don't take the tea off the ships. So 3 very different reactions. Charleston, take the tea off, put it in the warehouse. New York, I don't even want to see the ships at the dock. You keep them out there in the harbor. Boston, the governor of Massachusetts, says, you can keep them on the boats, but just keep them in the dock. We're not taking the tea off. So the people of Boston decided, well, you know what? Since we got all this tea, and it's sort of being forced on us, why don't we have a little what?
Tea party.
Yeah, why don't we have a little party? Okay? We'll have a Lipton tea party, okay? So they decided to have a party. And this becomes known as the Boston Tea Party. Now, there have been a lot of myths. There have been a lot of misinformation. And there's been a lot of, as the French would say, garbage concerning the Boston Tea Party. And it has been taught wrong for many, many years, especially when you're a little pup, K through 12. It's really been taught and mishandled for many, many years. So you tell me whether this is how you heard it or not when you were going through school. Okay? You tell me if this is not the reaction that you heard. Okay? There was this tea, and it was on the ship. And then these guys dressed up. These guys were the Sons of Liberty, right? And they dressed up and made themselves look like what? Indians, right? And then they snuck on board the ship, right? And then they threw the tea into the harbor, and then they left. Is that about the way you heard it?
Yes.
Well, okay. The only true things about that story is there was tea. It was in Boston. The Sons of Liberty had something to do with it. And the tea did go in the water. All the rest of it is bullshit. Okay? Rest of it is bullshit. Okay? So let me tell you what really happens. The true story. All right. Yes, there's tea. And yes, it's on the ships in the harbor. Okay? And yes, there's going to be a protest by the Sons of Liberty. In fact, forget about this sneaking stuff. Forget about this story about it being, you get on the ship. Nobody knows what they're doing. Wrong. As a matter of fact, the Sons of Liberty announced to the whole city of Boston that they were going to take care of this tea. They announced it. They told them what day. They told them what time. It was put into the newspapers, and it became the social event of the year. People brought their kids down to the dock to watch this. Okay? I mean, you brought your lawn chairs and your coolers. I mean, they made a whole party out of this. This was truly a party. Okay? So, it's true that the Sons of Liberty did disguise themselves. And what I mean disguise themselves is they took mud and put mud on their faces and their arms. They dressed differently. But they did not try to put this on who?
Indians.
The Indians, right? Maybe one guy stuck a feather in his hat, I don't know. But they weren't trying to be Indians. And I can prove that to you in a little bit. Okay? Now, why did they want to disguise themselves?
So they won't be known.
So they won't be known who was doing this. And also, what was the Sons of Liberty at this time? It was a secret organization. And the British, for a long time, have been trying to figure out who these clowns were. Who are these guys? So to avoid being seen, and you reveal your identity, so you keep your what? Your secrecy. That's why they were dressed up that way. Not to blame who? The Native Americans. Okay. All right. Now, the other part of the story is that they snuck on board the ship. All right, interesting. First of all, what are the ships made out of? do you sneak on board a wood ship? Okay? Think about this for a second. I'm sure many of you have lived in homes with wood floors. I'm sure some of you have tried to sneak in your house late at night after curfew when you were younger. Right? And you know how it is. You get in, you open up the key to the law, you listen to see if anybody's awake. You very gingerly walk on the thing, and just as you're about to be, perfect, you take that last step on that last board, and it goes like the loudest sound in the world, and all of a sudden your dad's sitting there, or your mom's sitting there, your parents are sitting there, you thought you were going to get away with it, huh? On top of that, what are these ships in? They're in water. Now, what do we know about sound in water from our science classes? It carries, right? Sound, water is a conductor of sound. It will make the sound travel. That's why if you ever live on a canal or a river and you don't want your neighbors to know what you're doing across the way, don't talk outside. Because they can hear every word perfectly clear about what you're saying. Because the water is carrying it across. Okay? All right? So don't do it. You want to do some hanky-panky outside by the backyard, okay? Somebody down the river is going to know you're doing some hanky-panky. They might come out with Peter Spy and just try to see what's going on down there. You're tipping off your hand, in other words, okay, by water. Okay, be careful. I'm not saying don't do the hanky-panky. I'm just saying be careful. At my age, have all the hanky-panky you want. Okay? I put enough children in this world, trust me. All right. So, besides that, what's the tea housing? What does it contain? How do they ship the tea? Yeah, in crates. What are the crates made out of? Wood. Now they're sealed. Okay. Oh, by the way, the tea didn't come in little tea bags. I guess you know that, right? Tea doesn't come in tea bags, right? The way it's shipped, the tea leaves are pressed into what? To bricks. They're tea bricks. Okay? And you want some, you chip off some tea off the brick and you boil it up and you have your tea. It's unlike, we're so used to here in America throwing the tea bag in. We think everything's Lipton. Okay? It's not the way it works in most of the world. Okay? These are shipped in bricks. Okay? So, right? What do you open a barrel with? A crowbar, right? Now let's hear about that sound. What, do they have a silencer on their crowbars? No? And then what did they do with the tea? They dumped it. Now they didn't just dump a box of 100 tea bags in the water. They dumped a lot of tea. And what happens when the crates hit the splash? Noise, more noise. So forget this silent stuff. All right? Forget the silent stuff. Now, where were the British? Where were the British? I mean, if this was announced, okay, and they told them what day this was going to happen, and they told them basically what time it was going to happen, right? You would think the British would be there to what? Wait to stop them. The British were there, but this goes to another point that we'll have to show you here, okay? Oh, the British were there, okay, right? But here you have 40, 50 guys with axes, crowbars, and you got like 3 British guys. The British aren't stupid. When those guys came walking towards the ship, the guys were there, the British were guarding the ship. What do you think the British did? They played matador defense. They got out of the way and waved. Okay? They got out of the way and waved. I mean, that's called matador defense. They played matador, Come on in! And they were trying to figure out what?
Who they were.
Who they could recognize. Hey, I know that guy. He can't fool me with that, crazy stuff on his face. Okay? Which tells us that in 1773, the British didn't have a very large military presence here, did they? And that makes sense. Think back to the French and Indian War. They didn't spend a lot of troops here, right? We did the what? We did the fighting. There weren't that many British troops here. So the British were powerless to stop this, you say. And so all this. So, now, when tea is dumped, into the harbor, which, by the way, if you've ever been to Boston and look at the harbor, it's one of the most filthiest harbors in the world. Even to this day, they've tried to clean it up a dozen times. And my contention, my thesis is, it started all back here when they put all this acid from this tea in this harbor, started ruining the harbor back in 1773.
Did anybody like fight?
No fighting, not a one, not one fist was thrown, not one punch, nothing. This was a party. Imagine this in your mind, okay? Here they are, the guys are walking down the dock, and the crowd, remember, that's like 6,000 people there.
Behind them?
No, sitting, waiting for them. And they're going, yeah! They're egging them on. Man, if somebody tried to fight them, they weren't going to have to fight those 50 guys. They were going to have to fight what?
6,000.
The whole crowd. No wonder they played Matador defense, okay? And they remember, they didn't get paid that much. It wasn't worth it. Look at that. 45 tons of tea were on those ships in Boston. First of all, 45 tons of tea. So remember that dropping it into the water? You're not making just a little, you're not making bubbles here. You're making what? Serious splashes. And I know some of you look like you're in pretty good physical shape, you know. 45 tons? How long is it going to take you to throw that tea overboard? Hours! I don't care how strong you are. You're going to get tired after the first ton. Right? 1 ton's 2,000 pounds. I go to the gym almost every day. I see these youngsters with the... I'm on my elliptical machine like a little lab rat, just trying to stay alive. After 20 minutes, I'm... People are coming up to me with water. I got my water, thanks. You know, these guys can pick me up with one hand, you know, do their push-ups and whatever they do over there. You know, and they're grunting and groaning, and I'm thinking, man, these people have some, they should eat more roughage. I don't think that they did a salad. I mean, you know, it shouldn't be a problem, okay? They're too young to have those kind of problems. It's my age has those problems. 45 tons of tea takes a long time to throw overboard. Okay, this takes a long time. This was not something that happened immediately. All right, so this, my friends, when that tea goes in that harbor in Boston in 1773, this is the point of no return. Okay, you can honestly say the revolution is in motion. Now, it hasn't formally started yet, you understand? We don't have any declaration yet, but anybody who thinks it can be solved and salvaged at this point is over. This is the point of no return because we just hit the British where? In their pocketbook, right. Okay, we just hit the British in there. You know, the rest of it has been, okay, you burn a store down so that one merchant's hurt, or, you boycott, okay, so now you've touched off a firestorm. Because who owned this tea?
The British?
Yeah, but who owned the tea? The members of the parliament owned this tea. They were the former British East India Company. You've just hit them in the gut, okay?
How much money was it that they lost?
The actual dollar amounts just depends on what they could have sold the tea for, so nobody's really put a market value on it, but it's phenomenal. Okay, it's a number that you can't even dream about the number kind of thing. It's a huge number.
Did you know if they were paying for the tea by the crates or by like individual?
You mean if you were going to a merchant for the store, store, you were buying it by weight.
Oh.
So you might get a half a pound or a quarter of a pound. You bought what you needed. That's how you bought it. That's why it takes a long time to sell this stuff. Okay.
Did they let them dock the ship there just so they could do this?
Well, that's the theory is that the governor of Massachusetts was in sympathy with the Sons of Liberty, although the governor is an appointee of the king. Okay, but some people speculate that the governor obviously must have known about this, didn't call for reinforcements, didn't call for the British Navy, those kind of things. So yeah, so there's a lot of questions about those things. You see. The Prime Minister of Great Britain was a man by the name of Lord North.
Who is the Prime Minister?
He's the Prime Minister in Great Britain. He's the Prime Minister, man in charge of the Parliament. And he gets through Parliament 4 pieces of legislation, 4 bills. And the intent of the bills is to punish the Bostonians, to punish the people of Boston for this act. Now, in England, when Parliament passed them, this becomes known as the Intolerable Acts, because what the Bostonians did was, in the British mind, intolerable. This cannot be tolerated. You understand? So in England, these are known as the Intolerable Acts. Here in the colonies, the Intolerable Acts got nicknamed the Coercive Acts, because they're trying to coerce the people of Boston into, basically making up for this incident. They're getting punished for this. So the people in Boston think they're being coerced, they're being forced to do something they don't want to do. Okay? That's what coerce means. When you coerce somebody, you're forcing them to do something they don't want to do. Got it? All right, so let's look at the pieces of legislation. All right? Now, the first was that the Boston port would now be closed until someone paid for the tea. And I'm emphasizing very strongly, someone. Now, before we get to the someone, let's just talk about closing the port first, okay? Back in this day, 1770s, even some people argue in the 2013s, the life of any city is its commerce. It's trade, right? It's business. The life of a port city is literally its port. You have to have ships coming and what? Going. That's the lifeline of a port city, is the commerce through its port. You understand? That's the blood of the city. And when you cut it off, you close off that port, you are basically trying to choke out the city. You're trying to kill its economy, which then its people will be hurt, and its people then probably will eventually leave because there's no what? There's no work. There's no jobs. There's no way to make a living, right?
How do they control it 4,000 miles away or whatever?
Oh, well, they have a great Navy. Now, remember, the British have a great Navy, so they bring the Navy into the port, and they block the ships from coming in. You don't have to be lined up next to each other. You just have to be within firing range. So you set your ships up, your British ships up in certain angles in the entrance to the port, and then any ship that gets in is told to stop, and if they don't stop, they get fired upon. Right? You've all seen pirate movies where they come up and fire Johnny Depp and all that kind of stuff. And unlike those movies, the ships don't come out of the water after a while. So.
Are the cannons really underneath in like the little porthole?
Some of them are. Yeah. Yeah. Some of them are. You can visit some of these ships. Some of them are museums. The most famous one is the Constellation, which is in Baltimore Harbor. It's a beautiful ship. It costs you about $10.
What's the one in Boston?
And Boston is the Constitution, the USS Constitution. I've been on that one as well. In fact, in my office, I have a pen, like a wooden pen like this one. I have a pen that I bought that was made up of the wood of the Constitution because they repaired it. And they take the old wood and they turn it into things like pens. You pay $90 for a pen. I thought it was a cool pen to have a piece of wood. I have now in my office a piece of wood in pen form, but nonetheless from the original Constitution.
I would have had a picture of it.
Okay. Nah, some things you gotta enjoy in life, like alcohol, food, pens. You have that pleasure, You're young, you can have different pleasures. So here's the second one. It says, someone. Now, let's go back to the original story. Who are they trying to blame it on? So if they're really trying to blame it on the Indians, why would the British say, someone? They would have known it was the what? The Indians. So the mere fact that the British said someone and not Indians tells us they didn't know who the hell did it. Okay? They didn't even say Sons of Liberty, because they weren't quite sure it was them. Why did they not know it was quite sure it was them? Because they didn't know who the hell they were. You got it? So this proves to us that this is why they disguised themselves, because they didn't want to be known. They didn't want to be recognized. Okay? Number 2. Boston's Colonial Assembly was canceled. You know, every colony had its own legislature, its assembly, as you saw, you read in your book for test 1, right? The Colonial Assembly was officially canceled by the British. Now, just because they officially canceled it didn't mean it didn't stop what? Yeah, it didn't stop meeting. It just couldn't meet in that what? In that building. Okay. So just because, the British said you can't, okay, we can't here, but we might meet somewhere else, behind the scenes. All right, number 3. They passed something called the Quartering Act, and this was going to become very important later in the Revolution. These, again, why this is the point of no return. You'll also see the impact on our own U.S. Constitution later. The Quartering Act said that since the British were now going to have a bigger military presence in Boston, and they were. Remember, they're going to bring in the Navy, right? They're going to bring in this big Navy now. The Quartering Act said that any Bostonian was be forced to house and to feed the British military.
And it's every household.
Every household. Now, if they came up to you and knocked on your door and said, we want to house these guys in your house, you have to feed them. You had no choice.
Was there like an amount they could only?
No amount, and there was no reparation. There was no payment for this. This was on your nickel. Okay?
So what if you don't got a nickel?
There is no nickel. You're going to feed them and you're going to house them.
But how would you be able to feed them if you can't afford it?
They probably wouldn't pick your house. Every house was eligible. They might not pick your house, Mr. Rocker. Then again, you might have been the richest guy in town, so they would have picked your house and probably put more troops there than other houses. You get it?
But for how long if they stop the ships from coming into the port?
Indefinite. Indefinite. Indefinite.
Can people live with you forever?
Indefinite.
Oh, wow.
They could come and go as they please.
And they could come and go as they please, absolutely.
Did they say how much you have to feed them?
How much do they want? They want to be.
It's got to be practical. I mean, if there's not enough food on the table, the guy's going to go, tell your wife to make more biscuits.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay? And there'll be more biscuits.
So you're telling me that the military would feel safe eating?
Now, this was a very interesting point that you make.
Like,
You would wonder about that. Why wouldn't they just poison them? Well, if all of a sudden soldiers start turning up dead in your home, you ain't going to have to worry about housing anybody else. Not only won't you be in the home anymore, the home wouldn't be there anymore. So, you have to make your choices.
Wisely.
What you probably want to do is just feed them, and hopefully they spend most of the day outside the damn house and get drunk at a tavern and don't come home. Exactly.
Or forget where they stand.
Yeah, or forget where they stay, exactly.
Paint your house a different color while they're out.
So now think about this, okay? This is tough, right? I mean, this is a violation of what we would call our civil rights, but back then, this is what it was. And you'll see when we get to the Constitution, there's reaction to these kind of things in our own laws, where it is illegal for our government to do anything like this, and it's specifically laid out, you see. And it's a reaction to what happens here. And we haven't even gotten to the Declaration of Independence yet. This is why I say it's the point of what?
No return.
Yeah, once you do this, it's a point of no return, right? You can't undo this. You can't undo this. And then there was the final law that required people to feed and house the British troops, okay? Yeah, which is what I said. It's required the British, people to feed in British. And then, again, there's no coming back from this one. All right? It's one thing to say something stupid to somebody and then, apologize, and depending on your relationship, you may have to wind up apologizing for the rest of your life. But that doesn't, the person's still hurt. This, there's no apology for. You know, once you do this, there is no relationship anymore, you understand? The only relationship left is a hostile relationship. You understand? Everybody understand what we're talking about here?
Hostile
Between the British and the colonists, because they forced them, the British forced the colonists to do this.
Did the population, get shortened because of this?
No. Well, I'll tell you why it doesn't. It really doesn't. It doesn't, not as radically as you think it would have. No.
Is this just for Boston?
Just for Boston. They had that party, remember? The consequences of their actions, right? See, you shouldn't party. All right, finally, there was something called the fourth of the Intolerable Acts, was called the Quebec Act. Now, you might wonder, what the heck does Quebec have to do with any of this? Quebec, after all, is where? In Canada. But understand that at the end of the French and Indian War, at the end of the 7 Years' War, who owns all that land that is now, used to be French territory? The British. And when the British took over Canada in 1763, there was a rub. There were some problems, you say. There were some rubs. First of all, in the French territories throughout the hemisphere here, the French was a very Catholic country. Right? It was still beholden to the Catholic Church, where by this time, in the 1760s, as we already know, the Protestant Reformation had taken place a long time ago in England. The English had broken away from the Catholic Church. Thank you, Henry VIII. Right? And the laws were different and the situations were different. Well, in the Catholic Church, back in the up until this time, they had a system of tithing. You know what tithing means? Yeah, you give a certain percentage of your salary to the church, and it's required. Okay, it's not a choice. Whereas today, in a lot of places, it's a choice, but back then it's not a choice. You had to give a certain percentage of your income to the church, the Catholic Church. This is one reason why the Catholic Church got so what? So wealthy. I mean, it's extremely wealthy. Today, the Catholic Church is still very, very wealthy as a result of this.
Don't they own every, like, doesn't the Vatican own every Catholic church in the world or something like that?
Well, yeah, the Catholic Church owns all of it, right. So you see a Catholic Church here on Tennessee Street, St. Thomas More. You know, the church owns that property. That is church property. You go out to the big Catholic Church, Good Shepherd, out on Thomasville Road, the church owns that property. The Catholic Church on Miccosukee, where they have their Trinity School, church owns all that property, including the school's property. John Paul II, down in Southwood, the church owns that property. Catholic Church owns the Cathedral of St. Louis, up on Fred George Road. The church owns all that property, you say. Church owns all the church, actually, the Catholic Church today is the largest landowner in the world. It's the largest landholder in the world. And it's got land that hasn't been built on yet. It's got land waiting to be built on it. They even have their own realty company. They have their own real estate company called St. Francis Realty. They have their own real estate company that goes around and buys potential property even today for what? For future churches to come. You see, buy it now while the land is cheaper than it would be in the future. So they started buying up land all over the world, knowing that they would put the churches on it later when the population got bigger, you see. So we have this tithing system. Well, when the British take over in 1763, what do you think the British Parliament says? We tax. You don't tax, Mr. Church. We tax. So you can't what? You can't collect this tithing anymore. We're in control of this land, not you. Okay? That's what the king and the parliament says. You can't collect this tithe. Okay? Can't do this. Well, 1773, that's going to change. The British are going to tell the French that they could keep their private land. Okay? That no, we're not going to claim all this land for the king, that you can actually keep your private land. That's the first thing you can do. And, more importantly, the Catholic Church now has the right to place a tax on its members. You can tithe again. The church has the right to tithe again.
Sounds like you're trying to get the French in their good graces.
Exactly, exactly. And what they say, you see, they're going to use the Quebec Act against the colonists. They're going to say, now let's take a look. Here we are, Massachusetts. You're a You're a bad colony. And you're going to be what? Punished. But look over at Quebec. They're a good colony. So they get to what? They get to keep their land and they get to collect their tax in the Catholic. You see, the Catholic Church in America couldn't tithe. Okay? Never, the Catholic Church never could tithe in America while the British were in control for that same reason. It's the British who control what? The taxes, not the church, you say. Which did endure itself to the Roman Catholic Church, but the head of the British government couldn't care, the king couldn't care about the Catholic Church. It's 100 years since the Protestant Reformation. He couldn't care about the Catholic Church at this point. Okay? So you see so this is a punishment. So what happens? So this is supposed to punish the Bostonians, punish the poor. Now when the harbor closes, okay, when the harbor closes, there's a problem. Remember, this is the Northeast. What kind of farming was done? Yeah, self-sufficient farmers, right? Just a little bit for yourself. You couldn't support a whole town or community, right? You might have a little left over. But where were the Bostonians buying their food from? No, the southern colonies. They were getting cotton from southern colonies with tobacco. Where were they? Middle colonies. Remember, when that port's closed, it's closed. It wasn't just closed to British shipping from England. It's just what? Closed. Meaning you have a serious potential problem. What happens? What happens is the other 12 colonies come to Massachusetts and Boston's aid. And the reason they can come to Massachusetts and Boston's aid is the stamp act commerce. Remember? They have already a network of what? Communications open. So when Boston and Massachusetts got in trouble, they put the word out. What happened to them? Instead of bringing the food in by sea through the port, which would be faster and easier, what do you think the colonists in those other 12 colonies started doing? Taking it in by land. Coming over those mountains and bringing the food and the cotton from the south and all the things that Massachusetts needed, they brought it by land. You see. And once again, what the British didn't understand was they were unifying these colonies. Okay? Now, when this happens, when the intolerable acts are passed, the Virginia House of Burgesses, which was the name and still is the name of the Virginia legislature, the Virginia House of Burgesses issues a call for a meeting. We need to discuss this. Okay. Such a meeting would have never taken place had the British not put such harsh penalties on who?
The Bostonians.
On Bostonians. On Boston. Okay? So this is the name of the Virginia legislature. This is what it's called. The House of Burgesses, and still is today. A Burgess is a member of the legislature. Okay? Again, that comes from merry old England, where a lot of your ancestors are from. It's clear that this was an overreaction. What the British did in Boston was an overreaction. They freaked. And by freaking, by having an overreaction, it unified the colonists even more. And you see, that's what you got to avoid as a government, as our own legislatures have to try to avoid overreacting. And you as personal individuals, humans, participants of the world, you too have to try to not overreact to situations. Now sometimes the overreaction is the right overreaction, but some people get so dramatic over things and they make a mountain out of a molehill. I mean, come on, you know? And you see it all the time, okay? So you just got to have cooler heads prevail and not, because by overreacting, you're playing into the hands of what? The other side, whatever other side is there. Question?
So by the British pretty much being a prick, like.
Oh,
12
we won't get that
colonies.
foul.
12
We can use
came-
cleaner language,
I'm
please.
just saying,
You can be more
I'm just
articulate.
saying, like, the 12 colonies came.
To the rescue of the one.
Just to have Boston back, so to say, right?
Correct. Correct.
And Boston would have done the same for the South.
Absolutely. Absolutely. By the way, you're now going to start to understand, when you think about the American Revolution, right? Where do a good number of the leaders of the American Revolution come from? What city?
Boston.
Boston. Yeah. When you think about it, a lot of the early leaders of the American Revolution are coming out of Boston. And you now know why, because Boston's a city that gets crushed. I mean, you know, it gets attempted to be wiped off the face of the earth. All right, so they call for a meeting, and when they put the call out for the meeting, when Virginia puts a call out for the meeting, does this surprise the other 12 colonies? No, because we've already had one. We've already had a meeting. So let's meet again. Okay? So it was really nothing new. We started a tradition here now. We have precedent, as we would say in law. We've done this before. And so that first meeting becomes known as the First Continental Congress. And the First Continental Congress is going to be held in Philadelphia in the year 1774, 1 year after all this craziness. And they meet in the home of a very wealthy Philadelphian, a very wealthy merchant. It's a 5-story house, including it's 4 stories plus a finished basement, and it's right on the Delaware River. Okay, it's right near the river. The house is still there today. In fact, you can go to the house today. Today, the house is a restaurant. It's called the First Continental Congress Tavern. And you can go there. It's not very expensive to eat there. You can walk in and you can tour the house. You can go up, the different floors. You can see memorabilia from 1774. There's notes. There's papers that were signed by people from the original Congress. The food is very continental American. That is, it's colonial food. So you might get some mutton pie and some turkey, you see. And the servers are all dressed up as characters of the time back in the 1770s. And they have their own brewery in the basement, so you can actually get ale that would have been made back in the 1770s in Philadelphia. They're using the original recipes for the ale.
Do they have tea?
And they do have lots of tea. They do have tea, but it's not British tea. It's very interesting. But they don't have sweet tea. Because they don't serve sweet tea in the north.
They don't have a party.
So all you Southerners who go north on vacation, you walk into a restaurant and go, sweet tea, and they look at you like, here's the sugar packets. You see, there's no sweet tea up there. I think McDonald's has finally started to serve sweet tea up north. And all the Southerners are flocking to it just to buy the tea. They're not buying anything else. So there's this Continental Congress. It's in Philadelphia, 1776. And the discussion is going to center around these intolerable acts, you see. Now understand, this is the first meeting since the Stamp Act Congress. It's the first meeting, intercolonial meeting, since the Stamp Act Congress. And what's going to happen here is we are going to start to see, very important, in 1774. We haven't even gotten to 76 yet. What you're going to start to see is a new radical movement in the colonies. When I say radical, it's going to mean different than the other protests and petitions that were happening before. When you say the word radical, it's going to get a little bit more intense. Okay? The reactions are now going to be a little bit more intense. First of all, one of the things that comes out